Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody, and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today we are going to continue our American government series by looking at state and local government. Don't forget that there's a link for a fill-in-the-blank worksheet in the description. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize for any mispronunciations ahead of time. I do my best. Let's roll. Each state has its own constitution, like the state's personal rulebook. Picture it as the supreme, no-touchy guide. Back in the revolutionary days, these constitutions were hot off the press with two big ideas. One, popular sovereignty, the we the people bit, meaning the government only gets its power because the people say so. And two, limited government, which basically means, hey, government, don't get too carried away. We've got a list of things you're allowed to do, and that's it. These early constitutions were like the original checks and balances menu. One side dish of power separation with a garnish of bills of rights. And even today, every state's constitution comes with that same combo. State constitutions all cover 6 general topics, from basic principles to things like governmental structures, kind of like organizing your wardrobe, shirts, pants, shoes, and a drawer for miscellaneous. Changing these constitutions? Not as hard as it sounds. Most amendments get proposed by the state legislature. In 18 states, however, voters can get in on the action by collecting a bunch of signatures. Then the idea either goes to the legislature or straight onto the ballot. It's like pitching a new rule for game night. But let's be honest, most state constitutions are as out of date as that old flip phone in your junk drawer. They're so full of specific laws, like statutory law, that it's hard to tell what's supposed to be permanent and what just happened in a legislature's post-lunch brainstorm. Time for a major constitutional cleanup. When it comes to the structure of state governments, just like the federal government, they also have 3 branches. Imagine the state legislature as the ultimate rule-making squad, like the board game designers who decide if you can move that piece 3 spaces or if it's straight to jail without collecting $200. They have the power to pass any law, as long as it doesn't step on the toes of the state constitution or the big boss, the federal government. And guess what? Every state legislature, except Nebraska, the cool, rebellious one, sticks to the bicameral system, mimicking Congress with its 2-house setup. Now, these legislators aren't just any random folks off the street. Every state has its checklist. You've got to be a certain age. 21 for representatives, 25 for senators, so no mid-college career changes. You need to have lived there for a bit, and yeah, you've got to be a citizen. Oh, and the road to power usually starts with party primaries, because nothing says welcome to politics like a popularity contest. Legislators serve either 2 or 4 years, depending on how much time they need to perfect their lawmaking skills. State legislatures meet on the regular, either annually or, for the hardcore ones, all year long. They're organized like Congress, with a boss at the helm and committees to break up the workload. Their mission? Pass laws that won't ruffle any constitutional feathers and keep the peace. This includes the police power, which sounds intense, but it's just about keeping things like public health and safety in check. Plus, they get a few bonus powers, like approving appointments, impeaching officials, and even dabbling in constitutional amendments. Not too shabby. The process? Oh, it's a lot like Congress. Bills are introduced by legislators, but anyone from interest groups to your chatty neighbor could be behind the idea. Some states even let voters get in on the action with initiatives and referendums. That's where the public gets to propose laws or give a thumbs up or thumbs down on what the legislature's cooked up. Democracy in action. Just like choosing toppings on a pizza, but with more paperwork. And then, there's the executive branch of the state governments, the top dog being the state governor. Being a governor is kind of like being the captain of a ship, except the ship is a whole state, and instead of just steering, you also have to deal with a crew of elected officials who are all also steering. The governor is the face of the state, voted in by the people, and usually serves a 4-year term, unless, of course, they get the boot early via impeachment, conviction, or voter recall. Yes, 19 states allow voters to hit the eject button before the governor's term is up. which is kind of like voting someone off a reality TV show, but with more paperwork. In 44 states, if the governor bails, the lieutenant governor steps up, except in Oregon, where apparently they like to keep things interesting. Despite all this, governors don't always wield all the power. They've got to share the spotlight with a bunch of other elected officials, including the lieutenant governor, secretary of state, treasurer, and attorney general. Basically the state government's version of a superhero team, but with more paperwork and less spandex. Governors get some pretty cool powers, though. They can appoint and remove officials, manage budgets, and even play commander-in-chief for the state's military. Plus, they have some fancy legislative powers, like calling special sessions of the legislature and vetoing certain parts of a bill while letting the rest slide. It's like getting a pizza, but vetoing the anchovies. On the justice front, governors get to play the role of merciful judge with powers of executive clemency. They can pardon someone, reducing or wiping out their punishment, commute sentences to make them shorter, or grant reprieves, which basically puts the punishment on hold for a while. And if they're feeling particularly generous, they can grant parole and let a prisoner out early, kind of like an early release from the world's least fun summer camp. The state judicial branch has the job of interpreting state laws and making sure that they are applied fairly. The law, society's playbook, where the rules are made up and the fines definitely matter. It's a mix of all kinds of legal mumbo-jumbo, from constitutional law, which is based on documents that everyone pretends to have read, to statutory law, which comes from lawmakers who may or may not have read the laws they're passing. Then we have administrative law, which is all about rules and regulations written by people who enjoy long titles and even longer meetings. And then there's common law, the legal equivalent of "we've always done it this way," built up over centuries. When a judge makes a decision, it sticks around like an embarrassing high school photo, serving as a precedent for future cases. Equity, on the other hand, steps in when common law is like a poorly constructed IKEA chair, looks fine but doesn't quite work. It's all about fairness and fixing what common law couldn't. Now, laws come in two flavors, criminal and civil. Criminal law is where people face consequences for bad behavior, with crimes falling into two categories: felonies, big-time mess-ups, and misdemeanors, small-time screw-ups. Civil law is less dramatic, mostly dealing with squabbles between people or people versus the government, where the worst that can happen is losing money. Think of it as legal monopoly. Got a wrongful act? You're dealing with a tort. No, not the cake. It's more like someone wrecking your stuff or reputation without signing a contract first. The law's like, you've been wronged and we'll fix it, but not with frosting. Enter the jury. A group of random citizens trying to stay awake long enough to decide facts in a case. A grand jury decides whether the state has enough dirt to put someone on trial. But for smaller cases, prosecutors skip the grand jury drama and just file a formal charge. Saves time, saves money, and maybe some eye rolling. Then there's the petite jury, aka the trial jury. They hear the case and settle disputes like a group of friends deciding where to go for dinner, except the stakes are much higher. For tiny cases, a judge might fly solo in what's called a bench trial. Justice of the Peace, or JP if you're cool, handles the small stuff, like minor offenses and officiating weddings. They also have the power to issue warrants, which is basically the law's way of saying, go get 'em. Magistrates are the city cousins of JPs and handle urban cases. Moving up, you've got municipal courts, where everything from traffic tickets to small claims gets sorted. For the big-time drama, state general trial courts take over. Here's where the real action happens, like courtroom TV, but less glamorous. For those under 18, the justice system goes easy on you, kind of. Juvenile courts handle the youthful rebels. Got beef with the lower court's ruling? That's where intermediate appellate courts come in. They review decisions like a parent hearing their kids argue for the 10th time about who's hogging the TV remote. If things get serious, the case might reach the state Supreme Court, the final word on all state legal matters. Who picks the judges? In half the states, the governor does it. In the others, judges are elected, proving that even in law, it's all a popularity contest. We also have local governments for our counties and cities. So the state is basically the parent in this scenario, giving local governments the green light to exist, like a parent handing out allowance, except with way more paperwork. Local governments come in different shapes and sizes, just like all those gadgets you've bought but never use. Now, counties are like the big kids on the block in most states. They're often divided into townships, which help out with rural chores, like a group of neighbors pitching in to clean up after a block party. Some states, though, have towns doing the heavy lifting that counties handle elsewhere. Think of them as the multitasking overachievers. A typical county has 4 key ingredients: a governing body, a handful of boards or commissions, bureaucrats who probably have more paperwork than you've seen in a lifetime, and elected officials who hopefully remember why they're there. The county board, often running the show, comes in 2 flavors: commissioners or supervisors. Commissioners are the smaller and more common version, kind of like the fun-size candy bars at Halloween. The state constitution is like the big rule book, spelling out what counties can do. And believe me, they've got their hands in both executive and legislative cookie jars. Historically, counties have always been the rural folks of local government, and that's still the case. No city slickers here. Tribal governments are a different deal altogether. Unlike your usual state and county setups, tribal governments run the show on their own turf, unless a treaty or Congress says otherwise. Their leadership varies, but it's usually a chief or chairperson with a council backing them up. They're kind of like the cool, independent sibling of local governments, doing their own thing and offering a wide variety of services. Towns and townships are scattered across almost half the states. In New England, towns are the local rock stars, running everything from taxes to spending, with a board of selectmen or selectwomen taking care of business between annual town meetings. Yes, everyone gets to vote at these meetings, so it's democracy, New England style, with a side of clam chowder. Elsewhere, townships do their thing, but they're more rural, and half of them even host annual meetings too, so they can keep up with New England. Boards of trustees or supervisors call the shots. But if there's a municipality within the township, it's like a mini government within a government, because why not add another layer, right? Now let's talk special districts. There are thousands of these across the country, each focused on one thing: schools, water, park maintenance, you name it. They're like those ultra-specific apps on your phone that only do one thing, but you can't live without them. As America went from wide-open rural spaces to jam-packed cities, local governments had to step up and provide all kinds of services. Think of it like hosting a giant block party. More people means you need more snacks, garbage cans, and a bigger cleanup crew. Cities, towns, boroughs, villages, whatever you call them, they've got a lot on their plates. When a state gives a city the official "you're a real city now" stamp, that's called incorporation. Cities get their own constitution, charter, and run things their way. The mayor-council setup is the granddaddy of city governments. In a strong mayor system, the mayor is basically the CEO, while in a weak mayor system, the mayor is more like the team player boss who shares duties with others. Commission and council manager governments mix things up further, ensuring that no matter what, there's always some debate over who's really in charge. Cities have gotten smarter about growth, using zoning to make sure houses aren't popping up next to factories. It's like deciding where to put the snack table, dance floor, and DJ at a party. Everything has its place. Finally, we can't forget the suburbs, where about half of Americans live now. Cities might feel a little left out when people move away, but they've tried things like annexing nearby areas or creating special districts to stay in the game. Because, nobody likes to lose guests at the party. The 50 states are like the overachieving parents of the nation, providing a buffet of services to their citizens. They're dishing out everything from education to health programs, sometimes directly through their state agencies, and sometimes indirectly by sending a local government a friendly nudge. Education is a top-tier responsibility, which is just a fancy way of saying it's one of the priciest bills the states foot. Local governments chip in for primary and secondary education, but they're often looking for a little cash assistance from their state buddies. And let's not forget about the grand universities. which states run like proud parents boasting about their kids' report cards. States also play the Good Samaritan role, working hard to keep citizens healthy with public health programs like Medicaid. It's like a medical insurance gift for low-income families, because who doesn't love free health care? They also toss some cash assistance to the less fortunate, which is just another way of saying, here, take this, and buy yourself something nice. This is an entitlement program, so if you meet the eligibility requirements, congratulations, you're in. But wait, there's more. States also try to keep us all from becoming environmental villains by enforcing anti-pollution laws and making sure our workplaces don't resemble a scene from a horror movie. When it comes to public safety, states have got it covered. They provide police units and correctional facilities for those who decide to play hide and seek with the law. With the rising number of convicts and longer prison sentences, the spending on criminal corrections has skyrocketed. Who knew crime paid so poorly? Now, let's hit the road. Each state takes on the colossal task of building and maintaining highways and roads. Sure, they get some federal funds to help with the interstate highway maintenance, but it's still a huge job that eats up a chunk of the budget. It's like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. Fix one pothole, and 3 more pop up. Of course, all these services need some funding, which brings us to taxes. State and local governments are like that friend who always forgets their wallet. They collect taxes to pay for their many services. The U.S. Constitution and various amendments put a cap on taxing, but the real power lies with state legislatures, which decide who gets taxed and how much. Spoiler alert, the largest source of revenue usually comes from state taxes, while sales tax is the kind of tax that everyone pays, whether you're rolling in dough or counting pennies. Then there's income tax, which is basically a progressive tax where the more you make, the more Uncle Sam wants a slice. Out of the 50 states, 43 love collecting personal income taxes, and 46 can't resist a corporate income tax. When it comes to local governments, they're mostly funded by property taxes, because who doesn't love paying taxes on their home sweet home? There's also an inheritance tax for those lucky enough to score some cash after a loved one kicks the bucket, and an estate tax because, well, why not tax the dead too? Other fun revenue sources include license taxes, document transfer taxes, and amusement taxes. Yes, amusement taxes, because the government believes even fun should come with a price tag. States also score non-tax revenue through federal grants and their own little enterprises, like toll roads and lotteries, where your chances of winning are about as good as spotting Bigfoot. Now, about that state budget. It's like a financial plan for managing public money, personnel, and property. These days, 47 states have embraced the executive budget, which gives the governor the superpower to prepare the state's budget. Once the legislature gives it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, the governor gets to manage the spending. It's like a group project where one person does all the work while everyone else pretends to contribute. And believe it or not, the basic steps of the budget process are pretty similar at the state, local, and federal levels. Because who doesn't love a little bureaucratic déjà vu? Okay, let's break this all down with a little recap. Each state has its own constitution, serving as a personal rulebook that emphasizes popular sovereignty and limited government, ensuring that power derives from the people while restraining government authority. These constitutions establish a framework for state governance, including 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, similar to the federal system. State legislatures, primarily bicameral, create laws while governors oversee executive functions and share powers with other elected officials. The judicial branch interprets laws, balancing criminal and civil matters. Local governments, such as counties and towns, operate under state guidelines, providing essential services. Funding for state services, from education to public safety, comes primarily from taxes, which states and localities manage through their budgets, reflecting a shared responsibility for governance across various levels. There you have it, folks. That is state and local government nutshelled. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. It would be civil for you to like this video, and it would be criminal if you aren't subscribed. Do you know the details of your local government? Let us know in the comments down below. See y'all next time on Nutshelled History.